the first thing is the roll call.
Yeah, I'm happy to do a roll call. Chairman Jim Marston.
Here.
Bob Burnham is absent. Martha DeGassi is absent. Karen Johnson.
Here.
Nick Kuntz.
Here.
Ken McClellan. Is present. And Barbara Silver. Present.
Okay, now's the time for any public comments. If you filled out a sheet, or if you want to fill out one, and you have any comments about anything that's not on the agenda, strictly a general comment.
Yeah, Jim, we have one public comment
Okay.
from Bonnie Elliott.
Bonnie,
Whatever's easiest for you.
if you want to be on the microphone.
Hello.
Oh, we now have Martha's here.
Hi. It's been a while since I've had this issue come up, so I've kind of forgotten what to do. But Saturday I went to a funeral at Whitehurst Chapel, which is a designated historic landmark, and the building's been moved several times and whatnot. It's an old building. It's a funeral home kind of thing. You have services and whatnot there. It is not wheelchair accessible. It was built in the 20s or something. They've done their best to make it accessible. They've done pretty good. But Saturday, and I have been in that place for another funeral months ago for a neighbor that passed away. So I have been in that building. They used ramps for me to get in that building. Saturday, they refused. They said they had ramps to get the caskets in, but they couldn't use them for wheelchairs, and I was really, really angry about that. So, and there were 6 of us in wheelchairs that day. One
None of
woman
you could get in?
well, they improvised a ramp and we all got in, but when you go in, there's 2 steps up the back, and then you go in, and then you have to go down 2 steps to get to where the parishioners or the attendees go. We could not go down that area because of our power chairs. The one friend that was there in a manual chair, her husband helped her get down there. She got down there. The rest of us stayed up in the other upper level where the choir would be if there was ever a choir. So it was just a real Mickey Mouse situation. It was terrible, and I don't know. It has to be an attitude thing with those people, and I don't know what's changed because it's the same people that I dealt with in the other funeral that I went to. They put the woman put the ramp down and all this. I was really, really, really angry, but I didn't get out of line. I was nice. But I was very disappointed in this, and I'm asking you as the committee, what do I do now? What can you do as a committee? What should the city do? It is a historic landmark, so I realize they have boundaries and stuff, but they didn't do what they did before, and I wanted to know what to do. Thank you.
Let me clarify something. In the past, you had been able to use a portable ramp.
Yeah.
And this time, you wasn't. So it sounds like it was a personnel decision.
Yeah, and it was the same people. It wasn't a different employee. It was the same person.
Wow.
Yeah.
With amnesia.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have a suggestion on what department should be notified of that or how this can be rectified? I realize it's historic, but there should be portable ramps available.
Yeah, again, with these private businesses and operations, I think kind of a tiered approach, your easiest bet is if you have contacted whoever's running the operation, or if you spoke with them and voiced your concern and give them a chance to remedy it, especially if they had a solution in the past.
Yeah.
If it really was just a personal decision, maybe you could get somebody within that organization to kind of hear you out.
Well, the person that, when I went in, the first time I went, it was the same people I dealt with. The same woman put the ramp down for me, and she was still there, and she wouldn't do it this time.
Yeah.
So I don't know who else to talk to. I don't know who else.
Say why?
She said it's only for caskets and it's too steep. And I said I used it before.
Yeah.
And she said, well, we can't anymore.
I think there's a lot of power in writing. So if you if you
Write a
drafted them a
letter.
letter or wrote them a letter, it would just kind of be on record, and they'd have something to reference to, and it could maybe get into the right hands. So That'd be the step I would take before attempting to involve a city department, because it's not,
I think the city should get involved. This is ridiculous. It's a historic landmark. This is terrible. They need to have pressure put on them because they won't. I will write a letter. I will do that. I'll follow through, but it's going to get lost. It's going to get lost. They won't care.
I think that the fact that it's a historic landmark is working against you in this case.
Well, sure it is. Sure it is.
But perhaps the fact that there were 6 of you there and all 6 of you could write letters, that might have more of an impact.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Now, was this person the owner or manager, or just a official there?
I don't know. They're the ones that are always there,
Okay.
taking care of things. So I honestly don't know.
I would try to get to the top dog if you can find that.
All right.
I'm sorry to hear this happen.
Okay.
Let us know.
thank you.
Thank you.
I want to take a minute to just say this is Veterans Day, and I spent 4 years at the VA hospital working there and met a lot of veterans that were wounded, and I just want to honor anyone who was a veteran
Oh, I agree. Thank you.
and all those who have passed in service and stuff. So just want to remind you, it's Veterans Day. Tomorrow there's activities in town, but let's think about that. Okay, it's time to look at the minutes. We have new copies we received through Mike and Tina. And we have several that we want to look at. The first one would be the minutes of February 17th, 2007. That was our regular meeting. That was when we talked about the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes?
Well, I'm still a little confused about the discrepancy between the audio file and the minutes, but I'm not disturbed as I was before.
Okay. Any other comments? Then I'll entertain a motion to accept or reject the minutes from someone.
So move.
Okay. And a second?
I'll second, although he entertained a motion to accept or reject, and I don't think that was clear whether we were accepting or rejecting. I
Karen,
assume
think
we're
you-
accepting,
Make yourself clear, please.
I move that we accept the
Okay.
meetings.
and I'll second.
Okay. So we have accepted the minutes for the February 17th. The next one was their special meeting we had.
What's that? No.
We had a special meeting on,
April 14th.
thank you.
I guess we didn't vote. We had a second, but we didn't
Okay, you
vote.
got me. Let's vote on the approval of the minutes for the February meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 Abstain.
I abstain also.
Any opposed? Okay. Now, the special meeting of April. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes? Yeah. I wanted to say I was glad that the assurance from Justin that the side door would be open had made it to those new minutes. Even though they've now changed their mind, at least we have a record that we were told that that side door ramp would be open. Do I hear a motion about those, accepting those minutes?
Okay, I move that we accept those minutes.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain because I wasn't there.
Okay. Okay, and we've accepted those minutes. And I think the last one has to do with the previous meeting, right? That date
September
was
1st. Yeah.
September 2nd. Any comments? Okay. Any comments on those minutes? Corrections or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on those.
I move that we accept the minutes of
Do I hear
September
a second?
1st.
I'll second.
All in favor of accepting those minutes of September 1st, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? All right. So the committee has accepted all 3 sets of minutes. The next section is for committee members' reports and staff announcements. Do we have anything from the staff, first of all?
Yeah, staff, I've got a couple things. Just to note, this will be Martha and Ken's last meeting. Their terms expire in December, and they'll not be renewing, and so the rest of the committee is tasked with assisting us in recruiting. The next recruitment is June of 2018, so we will have a couple meetings where we're short-staffed. But so if anyone has any recommendations, or just think about that over the next couple months too. We're looking for 2 new members.
Should I stay on until you recruit another individual?
If you're willing to do that, that would be great. Yeah.
It's not an atypical situation
Yeah.
on the boards.
Okay, that would be wonderful. And you do know that you
willing to do
can
that, too?
apply again, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to, but I'd appreciate if you could stay.
Sure.
And I do want to thank,
Been since 2008, I think you need some new meat.
But would you continue until a replacement shows up?
Yeah, I could do that until you find a replacement.
Thank you very much.
and just to make sure that it is legal to continue even though they don't get reappointed.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe it is.
Right, I think
Yeah.
that's the
If it
standard.
says so.
And now that we're not losing them right away, I was going to have a big thank you for their service, but I still will thank Martha and Ken for the time they put in so far.
I'd like to second that, thanks, and also, thank them for agreeing to stay on until we can find replacements. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
critical.
fantastic.
That's very good. Thank you so much, both of you.
One other thing from staff. Oh,
If we're talking about until June, I think that's certainly reasonable.
Thank you.
I hope you find someone.
thanks, Ken. One more staff thing. So we have made a couple updates to the Access website per the committee's request. So that's kind of an evolving thing, but a few of the requests have been posted up there, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw that and was aware of that and has been and knows that that can be updated. So that's something that has happened since the last couple meetings.
Appreciate that very much, and I just want to make sure the process for updating is to go through you with either request to put a certain link there, or perhaps if it's something we write, to actually have you proofread it and say, we can put that on there. Is that, we have to work through you to put stuff on there?
Yeah, it'd be great to work through. The thing I'm trying to avoid is getting too much duplicated documentation
I
on city
understand that.
websites. So if
Right.
there is if it's listed somewhere else on a city website, I'd rather kind of link to that as opposed to repost it.
Yeah, right.
So
Links
I
is the
can-
best way, but if, okay.
So I can kind of act as the go-between there.
Okay, anything else from the staff?
Nope.
Well, Mr. Burnham could not be here today. He had asked me to, well, he was going to talk about, and he asked me to summarize. He's been working on the new resolution. I think he and Mike came to an agreement that we could extend our terms to 4 years, which is one change. Right now, the resolution only calls for a chairman to be elected, and just a small typo, so they put in a vice chair would also be elected. There's a few other minor changes, but I think that it's best to wait until Bob is back to go over that. Let the committee look at the new proposed changes to the resolution and eventually get that to city council and see if we can make that official. Does that sound correct to you, Mike?
Yeah, I met with Bob on Wednesday of this week and went over some of his changes, and we went back and forth. And so I think the best way to do that is I will revise the resolution, and then we can send it out to the committee for review. And once everybody is in agreement, we can take it to council and make those changes, or attempt to see if they agree
Okay.
with those changes.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd like to make sure we understand is some of us had thought we should have more meetings per year, and Mike was not in favor of that. And so, to me, this is all whether we have too many items that aren't just dealt with yet, or when we have to run out of time. So I hope that we keep track of what we have for the future, and if we see there's too much, we can change that. But right now, your feeling is we don't have that problem. But let's make sure we keep track of pending agenda items. And if it gets too big, we'll have to rethink it. Is that?
Yeah, being a new staff liaison to this committee, I'd like to get through a year cycle and see if these pending items are truly building up. I feel like we're getting a lot of them on the agenda and dealing with a lot of them, so I really don't want to just make more meetings for the sake of making more
Sure.
meetings.
But I think within a year, we should know if,
Is there a process by which we can, if we find there's a certain issue that's timely and we don't want to wait, for a quarterly meeting, can we hold a special meeting?
Yeah, if there's something that is timely. I think the Valley Ordinance, which is later on the agenda, was kind of one of those items. It
Yeah,
seemed
right.
like there was some urgency, and then we found out there wasn't, but it certainly
Right.
made it onto the next available agenda.
But I can imagine, and I think I've seen in the past where issues might drag on, and maybe due to timing with the valet thing, if we don't all come to an agreement here today, we might need another meeting to get things done quickly. So I just wondered if that was a possibility, and it sounds like it is.
Yep, it's
Great.
possible. Let's see how it goes.
Great.
and one question for staff. I think Mike had a very good idea. There was no sense to give the staff report to council until the whole new officials are all in there, which should be after January. But I still think we had agreed that we could at least see the report before it goes in. So is that something you'll do before the next meeting to get us just a draft copy?
Yeah, I have
Or-
I have a draft presentation put together. I believe it was on this agenda, but then valet parking and some
Right.
of this other stuff
Yeah.
kind of reprioritized, and I did think it made a lot more sense not to present to an outgoing council,
Well,
seeing
I think that's 100% correct.
as so many new people are coming in.
But I'm just wondering, will we get something ahead of time for the next meeting, or do we wait till the next meeting before we see your draft?
Why don't I send out a copy before the next meeting, and we can potentially agendize it to review it at the next meeting?
I would appreciate that. I think that's the right thing. We can just get it through email. If there's comments, I'm sure there won't be much, but there might be something added that you had forgotten about that looks good for everybody, or, Perfect. Okay, that's good.
So I have a question. If we want to give you comments with the Brown Act, do we give our comments only to you, or do we copy them to the committee as a whole?
It would be cleaner just coming through me as a staff contact.
Okay.
And if there's something that I need to disseminate, I can disseminate it out to the
That's kind
group.
of what I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've been good with that, so.
Okay.
And as far as a quick update, I attended the latest appeals board, and of course...
One quick point of clarification on Barbara's last question. Would it be appropriate to also CC the chairman on that, the committee chair?
You can.
Okay. I think it would be good for both someone on the committee and staff to be aware of any comments, just so that there's a little bit of, so nothing slips through the cracks.
Yeah, what I usually do with that is I'll gather comments from individual members and then disseminate it out to the group as a change to the
Okay.
presentation or...
Okay.
I think we just need to keep in mind that I think the rules are that you can't talk to more than a quorum of the people. So I would think it's legal to write to the chair or the vice chair as long as it's less than
Less than
three
a
or
quorum.
less. That's my understanding of the Brown Act anyway. But, okay, I appreciate that. I think it'd be good if we looked at it ahead of time. Okay. Anything else on that? So I was just going to mention that we had been to the appeals board. Nick is on the board. I always try to go. And there's been a big problem in the city with contractors and developers lowballing the cost of the project and highballing the cost of the accessibility to get around the percentage requirements. And so Mr. Stuffer, the chief building official, has come up with another plan to at least have some kind of a minimum amount that they're going to have to report. If they're below that amount that's on a table, I'm not going to get into details, but if the table shows a certain amount and they're below that, they're not going to accept that person's bid or estimate. So at least, to me, it's a low table in the first place, but at least there's something going on to try to stop this from happening in the future. Does that sum up what you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I think, does anyone else have any report?
How do you know about that?
Pardon?
How do you know about that? I mean,
About the meeting?
was it something in writing or something he said, or that?
The whole appeals board meeting was about accepting or presenting to the group this new way to handle
So
estimates.
that's official?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Nothing's been totally approved yet, but it was, he wanted to get input from the appeals board.
Thank you.
It's not their job to check estimates, but it's something that the building department wanted to get through with us.
It's a bit of a difficult or involved process for the city, and I feel like this is a good step in the right direction. It may not be a perfect solution, but I think it's an improvement over the current process.
I'll add real quick that some cities do the same kind of thing, but they add a 2.5 or so multiplier to these numbers, which I think are very, very low. But anyway, it's a start to say, hey, you can't, if you go below that, we're going to question you. And
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to update people on that. Okay, we're going to have a report from our friend Elizabeth, I think. I don't see her name here, but engineering report?
Yeah, Ashley.
Ashley, I'm sorry. Elizabeth Shue is the actress, right?
That's correct.
Sorry about that.
No relation.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Shue with the Engineering Division. Thanks for having me today to give you an update. I have a number of projects to give you updates on this morning. I know at the last meeting, there was a request from the committee to have some more specifics about exact locations where some of our upcoming projects are planned, so I'm going to get into some of those details with you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with one of the projects that's about to start construction, which is the Lower Milpas Sidewalk Infill Project. That is going to construct sidewalk along Milpas Street in front of Tri-County Produce and down Milpas toward Cabrillo. It'll also fill in some sections of missing sidewalk on Calle Puerto Vallarta, Orilla Del Mar, and Corona Del Mar. And there's several ramps included with that work, 2 at Milpas and Calle Puerto Vallarta, 1 at Calle Puerto Vallarta at Orilla Del Mar, and 2 at Calle Puerto Vallarta and Corona Del Mar. So that construction is expected to start in early December and should be wrapped up early 2018.
Quick question. The streets
Sure.
you mentioned I'm not familiar with, but I'm suspecting those are the ones leading over towards the zoo?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
The infill is on both sides of Milpas or just on the Tri-County side?
On the Tri-County
Okay.
side.
Is the other side complete already?
I believe there is a complete corridor on that side up to the railroad tracks.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
this project will complete sidewalk across the railroad tracks on the Tri-County Produce side of Milpas. The next project that is currently in construction is the Cacique and Soledad pedestrian and bicycle bridges. They're well underway. The pedestrian bridges are anticipated to be delivered to the site at the end of this month, which is an exciting step in the project. And construction is expected to wrap up in March of next year, and that will also include sidewalk infill along Soledad Street. So that's an exciting project to look for, wrapping up soon. One of our next projects that will be going out to bid is this year's CDBG fiscal year 17-18 access ramp project, which is in the Laguna neighborhood over near the junior high. It's 11 access ramps, with construction expected to start early next year. There is 1 ramp at Laguna at Canon Perdido that will be reconstructed. That's in front of Path Point.
Right.
And we were finally able to get that included in a grant project to have that
Terrific.
ramp reconstructed. So we're looking forward to that. 1 ramp at Laguna and Carrillo, 3 ramps at Nopal and Figueroa, 3 ramps at Nopal and Clifford, 2 ramps at Nopal and De La Guerra, and 1 ramp at Anapamu at Salsa Puedes. So that project will be constructed early next year as well.
Quick question, are those pretty much making a path someplace? They're not just scattered around? You're making
Right.
some kind of...
We try to group
Right.
the ramps as much as possible. We've been really fortunate in successfully getting CDBG funds over the last several years to construct ramps within the CDBG eligible areas. So we've been able to take care of a lot of the corridors, like Voluntario Street on the east side, San Pasqual on the west side, and now the ramps are more scattered throughout the eligible areas. So we're looking for logical groupings that make sense for A, for the contractor, and B, for our application, because we have to do what's called an area benefit analysis, and we have to look at who the ramps would be serving, and for making that process more logical, it makes sense to group the ramps together.
Now, I have no one in mind, but if a group, let's say a group home or some kind of rehab center, popped up someplace and needed this, they can come to you and say, we serve this population, and you could put them on a list of what you could maybe do in the future? I mean, is there any input from the public, I should say, as far as we need this kind of thing in this neighborhood?
Yes, absolutely. We take requests from the public and we log those, and those go into our prioritization of our ramps citywide that are missing. And we're not always able to work from the top down because we're often scoping our projects based on what's eligible for grants. But we do, input from the public helps increase the prioritization of particular ramps.
Thank you.
And then moving on to upcoming projects, the next round of CDBG grant applications are due this December. The applications are going live today, actually. And the plan for that application, which was approved by the Neighborhood Advisory Council, is for 11 ramps, primarily along Alomar in the Oak Park neighborhood. So that's from between Castillo and De La Vina. There are 9 ramps along Alomar that are missing at Castillo, Orea, and then there's 2 alley crossings that don't have ramps currently. So that'll complete a whole corridor along Alomar.
To get to Oak Park?
To get to Oak Park.
Okay.
And there are 2 ramps at Constance and an alley between De La Vina and Constance that will also be included. So those wouldn't go to construction until early 2019, so about a year from now. We also have the Old Coast Highway sidewalk infill project that's currently in design. So that would complete sidewalk along Old Coast Highway on the north side from Salinas down to about Park Place. We recently did the pedestrian enhancements at Park Place and Old Coast Highway, so this project will tie in with those improvements. And that includes 3 ramps, 1 at Salinas and 2 at Ocean View. And then we have a number of highway safety improvement program projects, which are grant funded, that our traffic engineering division is leading. That includes intersection improvements at Alomar and Puesta del Sol. That will include 2 new access ramps and flashing beacons.
Those are the in pavement beacons or the on the pole?
The pedestrian activated on the pole.
Okay.
Similar to Upper De La Vina.
Can I ask how that got, never mind, it doesn't apply. My situation's in the county, I keep forgetting that. Never mind, go ahead.
I know, Foothill and Kyler Ellis. The next location is La Cumbra at Callecita. That will include 1 ramp and the same flashing beacons for pedestrians. They've also packaged 2 ramps at Brenner at Anza with that, and 1 ramp at Willow Glen Park as part of that. And they have improvements in design for State at Alomar, which is currently a pretty difficult intersection to cross. That'll be new ramps at all 4 corners, and they're doing some realignment of 2 of the corners to help shorten those pedestrian crossings to make it easier to cross. So that's all I had for today.
When are the last batch happening?
The highway safety improvement projects,
Yes.
those will be probably at the earliest construction late next year, probably into early 2019.
Okay.
I have a question. Can this committee get a view of the current priority stack?
Sure, I can share that
Okay.
of the access ramps.
Yeah, yeah, and also, can we get a better understanding of the prioritization formula? I've had it explained to me in somewhat vague terms, and I'd like to see an exact formula if possible.
Sure, I can also bring that at a future meeting, or I can provide that.
If you could forward
To
it to
Mike.
staff, that would be my preference.
Sure, there's a number of criteria, and it was before my time being involved with the Access Advisory Committee, but I know the committee was involved with developing those criteria. So the prioritization is based on proximity to schools,
Healthcare.
government buildings, healthcare, kind of the important destinations.
To be clear, my specific interest is in how public comment and opinion specifically shapes the priority. So I just want to better understand that and go from there.
Sure, we can share that.
Great.
It is, like I mentioned, those get logged, and
Yep.
then
But I want
get a point for
1 point
for a
per
request.
okay. But I guess I'm thinking of a situation where there might be a petition. Would those get 1 point per signature, or would that not help at all? That's what I'm looking to understand. And then how those points weigh against the other factors. Location, proximity.
Sure. Yeah, I can share, because each criteria has a certain percentage weight, so at some point you would reach the maximum that is weighted for public input or request.
Okay.
So there is a
I guess
there is a
what we're
limiting
asking for
factor.
is more transparency, because one of our charges is to advise on priorities, and it's like, well, starting from where? And
Yeah.
especially since some of us on the committee weren't around when you last consulted with this committee, and we don't have any records of that for ourselves.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank
We
you.
can certainly share that.
Yeah, thank you.
As opposed to specifically agendizing it, I'm happy to work with Ashley over the next couple months and get some documentation out to the group, and then we can
That
kind
would
of
be
use that
preferable
as
for
a
me.
starting point.
Excellent.
No sense to have another meeting if we can just read it.
Right, yeah.
Anything else for Ashley?
No, thank you.
I appreciate all that. I have 2 quick questions. We're going to have a sidewalk discussion later about safety issues. The person, the vice chair who had the questions isn't here, but one thing I think that you can help with, probably more than the other, is what is the priority or scheduling for 2 things, infill and repair of terrible sidewalks? Is that your department, and do you have any specific way that you put more infill and less repair, or the other way around?
I think that'll be answered pretty clearly in our item number 8.
Okay,
when
if
Jim
it will.
gives an update
Okay.
on sidewalks.
Yeah, but the engineering division focuses on infill, and then
Okay.
Jim Dewey's group focuses on the maintenance.
You don't do
Engineering isn't-
maintenance or repair at all, you just do infill?
We aren't involved with the
Okay.
maintenance.
And the other question is, on your curb cuts, you always use the Public Works Department's terracotta, tactile, and the gray sidewalk, correct?
That's correct.
So I just noticed down at the Hotel California, and they have red sidewalks and red tactiles. There's no color contrast at all. So I just want to make sure that you guys were using that standard of the red and the gray. And I don't know what happened there, but.
Right.
Okay.
I want to better understand that. I thought the federal law required yellow, and how is it that Public Works is using red?
So
long
the building code requires federal yellow, but that is specific to private parcels. It doesn't extend to the public right-of-way, and the guidelines from the U.S. Access Board and FHWA is that the requirement within the right-of-way is that there be a 70% contrast between the surface and the truncated domes. So that was how our standard for the terracotta red on the gray concrete became our standard detail, because it meets that requirement of having the 70% contrast.
But what about the federal requirement? Are you saying that that only applies to private property?
The building code is specific to private property.
Yeah, but the federal requirement should cover all, and the federal requirement is for yellow. That's where I'm struggling.
The right-of-way requirement is not covered by the federal code.
Right.
Right-of-way,
The ADA itself calls for a 70% contrast.
I see.
It's the California Building Code that calls for the yellow. Now, there's some discussion going on because there's certain parts of the government code that says everything should be covered under 11B, but that's to be discussed
Got it.
later. But I
Okay.
think it's being worked on.
Okay.
Yeah, it is under discussion currently.
I do have one more question showing my ignorance.
Sure.
Montecito, Coast Village Road, I know that's owned by the city. But how, is it just the right-of-way, or is it the lots that the buildings are on? How wide does that stretch become? Is it just the right-of-way?
Yeah, the city doesn't have a lot of parcels over there. There's the Muni Tennis Court, which that whole piece of land is a city-owned property parcel.
Okay.
But the city does own and maintain Coast Village Road, the roadway,
Including sidewalk?
sidewalks. Yeah,
Okay, so
into-
just the right-of-way, basically?
Wherever the property
Okay, that's
lines
what I
are,
thought,
yeah.
but I wanted to make sure. So unless it's a city-owned property, they don't own any of the land underneath the other businesses there, right?
Correct, per
Okay.
parcel maps.
So those building permits are then done by the county, is that correct?
Correct.
If you want to build a building on a lot next to
Yeah.
Coast
Some of
Village
them are
Road.
city.
City,
We'd
yeah.
have to pull up the map to see where the city limit line is, but some of the parcels are.
Are city.
Are city.
Okay,
Not city-owned, but within city
okay, thanks.
City
jurisdiction.
I just wasn't sure how the lines were drawn.
Right.
I can easily supply a map of those
Okay.
delineations, showing where if you do construction, who submits to the city
Okay.
building counter.
Thank you for your good report. I appreciate that.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Okay, we have a break scheduled at 10:30.
We are ahead of schedule.
I have scheduled. Since we might be expecting someone to come in later, who is giving the sidewalk review?
Jim Dewey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's not here, I don't think, right?
No, I can, if we take a break right now, I can give Jim a call and see if he can
Okay.
come in a little bit early. I know he was waiting till his time, so I
Is that
can.
okay with the rest of the group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks for sticking around. And how's Karen doing these days?
Fine, very good.
So just curious, but if 6 people in wheelchairs went to a funeral, it must have been someone who was disabled, I would guess? You know?
I think it was Stephen Day. Stephen Day,
Don't know him.
yeah, I think it was he, because he passed recently. And he was disabled and,
Did he live at your place?
no.
Okay.
Oh, no, he never did.
Okay.
Bonnie knew him quite well.
Okay.
He lived out in, near the university.
Oh, okay. I asked Bonnie to send me the name of the place, because I never heard of it. Whitehall, is it?
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either.
I'll do a little search and see if I can find who the corporate owner is or something. Because employees don't really have any power to
It's
decide.
awfully nasty to do that.
Well, it seems like it, but there's always two sides to every story, sometimes three.
Concerned citizens.
Well, how are things going for you?
Just fine, thank you.
We get some more new blood on the committee.
Mike, I have a question for you. Joe Black, the interpreter, used to be on the committee years ago, and she ran the ILRC, so she worked in town. She lives in Carpinteria, but she still does signing in Santa Barbara. She was interested in joining, but she says, I don't. She's not a resident. She's not a resident, but she works in Santa Barbara, but it's not full-time. She thought she shouldn't apply. So I know you're not city council who makes those rules, but what do you think if you worked part-time, if you make some income in the city?
I mean, I'm personally open to it. I think she'd be a good resource.
I do too, and she's been around forever in the field.
And I can do a little digging to see on how heavy-handed they are on that kind of stuff.
Could you do that for me?
Yeah, I can't imagine them.
Okay. I mean, when she was, in the other problem is, when she was getting paid to be Ken's interpreter, then she's employee of the city.
Yes. Really a contractor.
Contractor.
Yeah. Part-time employee of the city.
Now, I forget what the rules say. Does it say you can't be a contractor or just can't be an employee?
Employee.
Okay, so she's not an employee, and she does get some of her income from interpreting in the city. So if you could find out if that's even eligible.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
Okay. That could be one replacement if that's eligible.
And if she's interested.
She said she was.
Okay. Yeah, she'd be a good resource.
I think so. And she wrote me at the last minute and says, I don't think that I qualify as this. And I said, well, you still get a paycheck from ILRC for the interpreting, but in her mind, she doesn't work in the city. But anyway, if you could check it out, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, Jim's duty duties here if we want to start anytime.
Are we ready to go then?
Oh, you got cold.
If Mr. Dewey is ready, I guess we could start up.
Let's see, I'm ready, and I'm Jim Dewey. I'm now the Streets Operations and Infrastructure Manager, but it's good to see all of you again. Missed you.
And we missed you.
Anyway, I have a topic that I think is well, I missed you. Okay. I have a topic that really is right up your alley, and I need some help on this. Last Tuesday, we passed a sales tax measure, Measure C, that is going to help us to fund our streets infrastructure backlog. And that includes things like accessible paths and, our streets, of course, and sidewalks. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about sidewalks and accessible paths and kind of let you know where we're at with that and what we're planning to do and how we need your help. So if we can go to the first slide. Okay. Does anyone need a description of these slides as I go through them? Okay. That's okay. This first slide is challenges to accessibility. So this is just the overview. I'm going to be talking about our accessibility challenges in the context of sidewalks. I'll be talking about different difficult situations, problems that we have in the city of Santa Barbara with our accessible pathways. And we'll also identify accessible path priorities, and that's really what I need your help on. And so we need to kind of brainstorm on that. Next slide. This picture is taken on Chapala Street in front of our Lot 5. That's where the MTD station is. And what this picture shows is a lot of very uneven sidewalk just a lot of unevenness in our sidewalks. And basically that unevenness pretty much as a stopgap measure is filled with asphalt so that we can at least get a semi-smooth surface. But in this picture you can really see a couple of things. So you can see a lot of unevenness, so it's difficult to roll a wheelchair over. It's difficult for the sight impaired or blind to be able to really negotiate some of these uneven surfaces. But it also does not meet the cross slope that's required by ADA, which means that it needs to be less than 2% grade, and that right there is more than that. In this particular case, it doesn't represent a huge problem because it's a fairly wide area, and that people aren't going to be ideally directed into the roadway because of this lack of cross slope. But the bottom line for us is that we have over 500 miles of sidewalk that we need to maintain, and we have a lot of street trees that uplift the sidewalk panels, and so we have a lot of this stuff going on. We also have a lot of expansive soils, adobe, and when adobe changes its moisture content, it moves up and down. It's like a big sponge, and so we have a lot of these surfaces like this that are moving all the time, and they need constant repair, but they also need replacement eventually. Okay, next slide. So this slide shows some of the obstacle problems that we have in the sidewalk area, and this picture was taken over on the mesa, and it shows a large palm tree that's taking up 90% of the walkway, so it's completely blocked essentially. And we have a lot of this kind of stuff going on too. Not only do we have narrow walkways, but we should have a minimum of 48 inches for a sidewalk, but in some cases we have a lot of problems with obstacles, and these things need to be removed. Okay, next slide. Another issue that we have, and this is common any time you have a hilly area, is that we have steep slopes. So according to ADA, you can't really have a slope, or a slope is recommended not to exceed more than 8.3%. And what this slide shows, it shows a access ramp on a sidewalk on a corner, and then the corner basically comes up and enters into a hill that's about a 20% slope. And so that's really, that's not a great situation for accessibility. And but we do have some of this going on. Okay, next slide. And then we have some other obstacles. One of these pictures shows Shoreline Drive, and there's a gigantic eucalyptus tree right in the middle of the sidewalk. I don't know how it got there. It's there.
The guardrail's kind of newer too, because we tried to go that route. There's no other route, by the way, along that roadway, because the other side of the street's unimproved.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And then there's another picture that shows a utility pole, and it's guy wires. Basically, it's blocking most of the sidewalk. And we have some of this, too. This is also over on the Mesa area. So what the American with Disabilities Act really does, what it requires of accessible pathways, is a very ideal situation. And sometimes for us, it's difficult to get at those. And so, in the best case scenario, you have a curb space, which is 6 inches, a planter space, that is approximately 4 feet, a pedestrian travel zone that's about 60 inches that would allow 2 wheelchairs to pass by each other without conflict, and then also a frontage zone, an area in front of a commercial area or a commercial store that would allow entrance and egress without having problems with the accessible pathway. But in reality, we're challenged with a lot of different things. We have narrow pathways, we have pathways that have slopes that do not meet ADA, and a lot of other problems, a lot of the obstructions that I talked about earlier. Okay, next slide. So some of the solutions that are recommended, and I'm glad that at least, they do recommend some solutions. If we're not able to obtain a 2% cross slope, we can reduce the size of the accessible path from 48 inches down to 36 inches and create kind of a 2% sloped area. But the problem with this is that it also creates problems. Supposing that your wheelchair migrates off of that path, and then you have a very steep cross slope that will lead you right into the street. That could be problematic. Another thing we can do in order to get the proper cross slope is to raise the curb. But whenever we raise the curb and there's street parking there, people can't open their doors necessarily, and it could represent, a trip hazard, a lot of issues. So in some of these cases, they're good workarounds, but they're not ideal. Another thing that you can do in the case of steep grades is that you're supposed to have periodic landing areas. So if a wheelchair is negotiating a steep grade, you come to a level surface so that you can slow down and make sure that you don't have a runaway condition. But some of these things are kind of difficult. We don't really have the real estate for some of this. And then another solution to a steep grade is to create a wider accessible path so that a wheelchair can take a diagonal route and be able to negotiate the slope easier. So this is really what I'm asking the Access Advisory Committee, is that we need to get some input on really two things. We need to identify the priority accessible pathways in terms of sidewalks around town, and we also need to identify problem areas, problems that you've encountered that we need to take care of right away. Even though we do have funding, coming in through Measure C, we're still, we don't have all the money in the world to take care of all of these issues. So what we want to do is prioritize accessible pathways around town so that we can focus on those areas and take care of the problems that you can identify. And so I'm not going to make a suggestion about how we can do that, but I guess I am going to make a suggestion. If we could form a little subcommittee of informed people that want to be involved in this process, that can work with us to identify these things. So identify the most important, the priorities, the priority pathways around town, and then the problem areas. That would really be a great help to us. And so now I'll turn it over to you for discussion or questions.
What locations are you referring to so far? I mean, are we talking about, you're talking about the Mesa, which is way over there, like Shoreline area? In fact, I don't see wheelchairs over there that much. I mean, certainly if there's a park or public space, definitely, but right here, around here, what I'm seeing.
Doesn't this overlap?
Like Ellison Way. I see some barriers in there. In the shopping areas, there's definitely a variance in the slopes. So anyway, I guess something that we need to keep our eye out, especially here around downtown, for barriers like that. But I mean, maybe we need to figure out where wheelchairs are coming from, because I honestly don't see a lot of wheelchairs in the area, so not a lot of experience, I guess. Maybe I just need more information. When we're talking about like the sliding doors, some of the businesses got sliding doors instead of doors that open onto the sidewalk, which is a really good idea. That creates less of a barrier. So I don't know, maybe, I'm sure that you see a lot more than I do, so you could tell us some of the places that you're concerned about, or Nick, people that actually have experience using wheelchairs in the area. I'm sure you guys see lots of places where they're experiencing barriers, whether we're talking about manual wheelchairs or motorized wheelchairs.
I think that the pictures and the examples that I chose were a little bit misleading because those aren't necessarily the priority pathways. I just brought them up as examples.
Yeah, they're good examples. That one with the sidewalk, that was only like 10%. I think only maybe a bicycle could get through there.
But it's...
Of course, widening that kind of space, but, when you have trees that grow up in the middle of them, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know why my phone's ringing, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm going to throw it away in a minute.
So, I'd volunteer for the subcommittee. I have an interest, and it seems to me that that the work Ashley's doing and has done would be a good place to start to look at priorities. Yes? No?
Because I was just talking about ramp prioritization, where we're missing ramps.
Correct. So what I'm talking about are, we do have another program for ramps, and what I'm talking about is maintenance-related replacements and maintenance on sidewalks, primarily.
Do you get comments from the public already? Complaints?
We do, and I want to go back and answer the original question. Is where do I think the priorities are? Of course, it's the priorities are where most of our pedestrian traffic is already. So along commercial zones, in the interior, like the downtown corridor, any place where they're shopping, any place that where you see a lot of people gaining access to different services around town, those would be our priorities. And then it would extend out. I mean, it's possible that there may be some residential areas that have a lot of pedestrian traffic. I mean, anywhere that there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, I think would be a priority. And Nick, maybe you can speak to this, but we're just, what we would like is guidance as far as where the areas that need the most improvement, the areas that we need to focus on from a maintenance perspective. And what I mean by maintenance is where we need to correct problems with shifting sidewalks, where we need to do sidewalk replacements, and sometimes even where we need to just make a sidewalk a little bit wider if we have the real estate to do that.
Okay.
Would it make sense to blend the Public Works Traffic Division priority system, rating system to some degree into the repair, sidewalk repair division? I mean, could we use some of your, the ratings that Ashley presented in order to help prioritize along with public comment, or if I were allowed to be on this committee, ad hoc committee, which I'd like to do, just actual report of specific locations to help, to use the traffic division priority system as part of the way to prioritize the repair.
Thank you for being more articulate in what I was trying to describe.
The answer to that is that we work very closely with engineering, so everything that we do is coordinated with engineering. So yes, it would involve engineering staff, and it would involve a rating system. I'm not sure, were you talking about PCI or?
So we have a prioritization of missing ramps and missing sidewalks throughout the city based on some of the criteria you were mentioning, proximity to commercial, healthcare, schools, kind of points of interest. So that could be a starting point for
Right.
identifying areas that are high priorities for maintenance as well as missing.
At least describing them in similar language.
And to put it another way, a sidewalk that's almost impossible to use is just like a missing sidewalk. It's not being used. So I think that would kind of combines the two measures, don't you think? I would be glad to serve on it too, but I think Mr. Burnham probably has more interest in this, and he does know this city inside and out. amazing for a blind person to know every street he's on, but you'll have plenty of people who would like to help you with that. I have one question I want to get out beforehand. Did we ever have a transition plan for sidewalks when it was done by Gilda? And if we have had one, is it being updated? If we never had one before, should we have a actual transition plan? So, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the answer to that is no, there is no transition plan for sidewalks.
Okay.
There are for walkways connected to our buildings.
Right.
But that's what really this effort is about.
Okay.
And so it's to create a transition plan.
Okay, so even if it's not an official ADA transition plan, we're going to do that, try to get some priorities, right?
Yes.
I really applaud all that. Just curious, did you ever get a copy of the notes that Bob Burnham sent out? Because he has a whole list of some places, and off the top of my head, I'll mention two that I think I'd like to hear your input on. One is the north side of the CVS on State and Nick, what's that other street there?
Kyler
Ellis. There's open tree wells, and there's ivy on the building side. Hardly any way to get through there. And another one is Chapala between Pedregosa and Mission. And I do have a list here, but I don't want to take the time to read the whole thing. But one thing I like to say this before. You're looking right now at wheelchair access, which I applaud very strongly, but remember there's a lot of problems for people who are blind and visually impaired, including running into trees that are overhanging. And you showed one slide with the guy wires and the pole in the middle. Those guy wires at 45-degree angles or something are deadly for a blind person. Your cane doesn't pick that up, so make sure that our scope is bigger than just wheelchair accessibility, but safety for people with low vision. And
I didn't mean to misrepresent that either.
I didn't think you did.
It's going to include all of those elements, so,
Right.
yes.
And I think many people have already had volunteers to do this, so I'm very happy that you're saying that you'd like to have some kind of group like that, priority. I think the suggestion that we kind of use Ms. Shue's priority basis, because like I said, a bad sidewalk is just as bad as a no sidewalk to a chair user or a blind person.
Do you want us to name the committee members, or do you want to select them from the people who are interested?
What I'd really like for you to do is just take this as an action item to pull a group together, because there may be other people that are interested in the community. I'd like for it to be a workable size, so no more than 5 people.
So not restricted by the Brown Act, but a working committee?
Yeah, exactly.
Could we say that perhaps everybody here on this committee could give you some input now? When you get down to a working committee, you might want to assign 5 or 6 people, but at this point, we don't have to have a non-quorum ad hoc committee, right? We could all just discuss with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if there's anything that you want to bring to my attention right now, we can capture it in the notes and take care of that. But what we're really looking for is kind of a comprehensive priority system.
For the future.
And it's going to take some effort.
And I also think that some kind of a town hall meeting, or several of these, sponsored by us or by some of the disability groups in town, might get the general public out and say, we're soliciting comments on pedestrian safety and accessibility.
And sidewalks, where,
Right, and just get a town hall meeting.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of want to ask Mike before, this would not necessarily be a special meeting, but do we have a right to put out a flyer, say we'd like to have disabled people show up and just tell them us their concerns? No votes, no actions, no notes from the staff, just can we do that and have an open town hall?
I think it's well within anyone's right to rent an event space and have an event for anything they decide.
Okay.
To pull in city resources may be a conflict, but if you want to
Okay.
have a
Could have it at the
event,
east side of the library, we could have
They rent
all or
space there.
some of our group? And, okay, that would be a good place to get it. But I think right now we should just, and I do have Bob's list here that I like I said, I won't read
Excellent.
off.
And Jim, I haven't sent that to Mr. Dewey yet, but I will when this
Okay.
meeting's done.
At the bottom, he has examples of some places that are pretty, I know most of those. And-
I would volunteer my email to the committee members and to whomever, if I can be in charge of compiling a list.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
We kind of do it geographically. So there'd be some order.
Yeah, if it could all end up in some sort of database or Excel sheet, if someone's willing to
Yeah, I could
compile
put
that,
it
that might
into
be
Excel.
an easy way to prioritize.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good.
That's a good start, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And also, I think that the membership, the representative membership of this board, it can't exceed, what, 3?
For Brown Act, correct?
Yeah, and so if we don't want to notice the meetings, I mean, we could have a noticed meeting too, so anytime this group meets, but it'd probably be easier if it wasn't.
So no more than 3.
Yes.
Just to make sure we all are able to write to Martha and have her put a spreadsheet together.
Yes.
We just no communication back.
Independently, or you could just all come through me as staff liaison. If you guys have input to specific locations, you can freely email them all to me, and I can work with Martha directly and compile a list.
What's the best for you?
It doesn't matter to
Okay,
me.
I think either way, as long as it's not a two-way conversation, it's legal, but
I think what maybe a good way to handle it is for the subcommittee to come, and we'll come up with the recommendations. The subcommittee will come back and present to this board, and then the board will agree to the prioritization and what the subcommittee's findings are.
So, but as far as the subcommittee goes, it should be constrained to 3 or less members.
right. That's an actual committee that meets and does things,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Not just those who give it problems, okay.
Well, with Bob,
We have
that,
2 people so far, and you're assuming it should be Bob rather than you, so.
Well, I'm just thinking he would, this has been one of his
if he says
pet
no-
projects for years, so.
If he says no, would you be willing to
Oh,
be on
sure,
it?
sure.
Oh, okay, then we have our 3 members.
Right.
And not speaking directly for Bob, but I met with him on Wednesday, and he is very passionate about this, and I'd be surprised if he didn't want to be
So
a
would
part
I.
of the
And
subcommittee.
that's why I'm being humble and saying, okay.
I just wanted to nail down that
Oh, yeah.
we had a committee and we're ready to go, a subcommittee.
Yeah, he walks all over, Bob does, so he knows the city in and out.
And I probably, wrong time to say this, but there was a comment earlier about you don't see many people in wheelchairs in this area or that area. The funniest example to me was, we were trying to put a elevator to a 3rd floor at a certain unnamed building, and the people there said, I never see any people with wheelchairs here. And I've heard that comment all my life being in this access business, where people just think, well, there's no one there in a wheelchair. Well, that's because you can't get there.
Yeah, cart before the horse.
yeah, that's
So we
why we're
can't
meeting.
use that as, we need it because there's no wheelchairs there, or we don't need it.
So,
Okay.
in the interest of formalizing this, do we want to entertain a motion to form this subcommittee, and assuming, or in the unlikely situation that Bob doesn't want the role, that you would take it, and so that we don't need to have another meeting for this?
Yes.
That's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea. Why don't you?
So I motion that we form the subcommittee to include the 3, as mentioned, myself, Martha, sorry, terrible with names, and Bob, at least contingent upon his acceptance, and if not, then Jim would fill that 3rd seat.
And may I add, with the stipulation that we all can write to Martha or,
I don't
Mike.
think we need a stipulation there.
Okay.
I think that's
all
been
right. Well,
established.
we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second?
All in favor of forming a subcommittee of those 3?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, that motion passes.
Excellent. So we want to have further discussion about current priorities that are on our minds, and I heard that suggested. And one of the first places that comes to my mind is the south side of State Street between Las Positas and De La Vina, where there's a lot of upheaval from the trees. But I understand that there's a potentially competing or complementary project underway with respect to the Naval Reserve or the Army Reserve building and the city park. Like, some of that might be changing, and when that happens, maybe this would be part of those, could be part of those improvements and might be better. I don't know the status of that project.
Yeah, I know that the armory is going to be, it's the priority, I guess. It goes to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That isn't the correct bureau, but it has to do with that. They get the first shot at purchasing that property. And then, yes, it is true that Parks and Rec is going to, they have a project to renew the area where the old youth building was, which is right there at Las Positas, past Las Positas on the south side of State. So it's, I don't know what the scope of that project is right now, but there is a possibility that something like that could be provided. But I do believe that they were, Mike, do you know anything about that project?
We spoke at a previous meeting on the dog park project that Parks is proposing on the, I guess it would be the east end of the park. And there were some pathway improvements and a dog park improvement, providing access to the restroom facilities.
So I guess the quick answer is yes, there is a possibility.
Would that construction, if it did come about, if there's a major renovation project there, would that require expenditure on the right of way there on the State Street frontage?
You know, I don't know what the scope of the project is at this point, so I can't really speak to it.
But in general, most projects of that nature, it would be at minimum required to have some accessibility component to provide a path of travel to public services and nearby sidewalks. If it extends into the right-of-way and streets and roads, that's...
I think there is a path of travel there, it's just a maintenance issue, and so I'm wondering what the policy might be on there, if any.
I'd hope that if a large-scale project were to occur in that location, they wouldn't leave an old, unusable path of travel. That the path of travel would have to be maintained or replaced to meet current code once a project of that size happens.
In situations like that, I don't see much option other than, removing those trees. And is that, I think I remember similar projects where there was tree removal, a fairly large-scale tree removal to accommodate sidewalk maintenance. Can you talk about that?
Generally speaking, trees are pretty well protected in this town, and we usually need to find, route our paths around the trees as best we can. There are some circumstances where trees get removed and replaced, but, if you look at Anapamoose Street over by the high school, I mean, it's not common practice to remove a tree in order to gain a better accessible sidewalk path. I mean, is that...
Yeah, I can't see removing trees. I don't think that's going to get by the city council at all.
Yeah, but there are some opportunities, adjacent to the park to reroute the sidewalk, around trees. So we might be able to have some real estate to facilitate that.
You mentioned raised sidewalks as an option, and you did say that it wasn't an ideal option because of door clearance and whatnot, but keep in mind, someone like me, I have a side entry ramp vehicle, and many conforming height curbs are too high for my ramp to extend and allow me to park on street in a regular non-ADA parking spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. and I'm glad that you brought that up.
I was thinking of another problem area, which is West Valerio between State and Chapala. There's overhanging branches, there's open tree wells, and guy wires. But that brings me to something I hope that we can address immediately. There are many tree wells downtown area where the metal grates are missing or half missing. They've been missing for as long as I've lived here. Can we make some kind of immediate decision to replace those metal grates, or at least fill up the tree well with dirt so there's not a tripping hazard? Some of them are 3, 4, 5 inches deep. And probably what happened is someone stole them to sell them for scrap, but whatever happens, they have been missing for many years. Can we address that issue with some kind of proactive move?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that has been brought to our attention several times. The only reason we haven't done it was just lack of funding. But those tree rings, I mean, they have these concentric removable pieces. As the tree gets larger in diameter, you can, pop those pieces out and make the hole in the center larger, and then they'll be able to set flatter. Right. And yeah, there are some pieces that are missing, but that is a priority for us, and we have those notes captured. So,
because that's dangerous for blind people, skateboarders, bicyclists, and wheelchair wheels going off the edge. Okay. And I just hope we can really make a quick adjustment to that, at least downtown, to try to get those fixed.
Yeah, I was thinking, on State Street is where you're talking.
In the side streets, so like Chapala and Carrillo and stuff. Just a little bit off of State. There's a lot of a problem there too.
I wonder if there's alternatives to the metal tree rings that might be more affordable and allow us to cover more ground with the budget. I'm thinking gravel or something in some cases might be sufficient. If it's in a narrow path of travel, then I think that the tree ring makes a lot more sense because it provides more stability for the path of travel. But in areas where you have ideal sidewalk widths and ideal planter widths, but you still have deep wells, just more dirt or more gravel might be a better solution if that's an option. I don't know.
It is an option, and we are using that in some places. I would like to see a replacement of the tree rings, because once they're properly fitted, they're actually less maintenance than trying to maintain decomposed granite or any other type of filler. Because what happens is that people ride over that or walk over it, and then all the gravel gets spread around, and then people have to sweep it back in, and some of it gets lost. So
somebody picks it up and throws it.
Yeah, it's a continuous maintenance thing. The tree rings actually are a pretty good idea. It's just that they haven't been regularly maintained.
Are we able to put that on the top burner, you think?
Well, we'll definitely put it on put it on the top of the list.
Okay, thank you.
I can't tell you exactly when we're going to do that.
And then there's other problems with the newspaper stands and different obstacles in the way. But I think this is a great forward step, a great first step in doing this with the subcommittee and getting more input. And we can deal directly with you. We'll give Mike our stuff, but you are going to be in charge of this? So.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I'll call the next meeting for the subcommittee, and then we can talk about strategy and inclusion of community and how we can proceed.
Okay.
Jim, I recall the situation you helped me with in my neighborhood with that the fire hydrant that was replaced in the path of travel, and we came up with a good solution in a quick fashion, and I thank you for that. But I'm wondering what more we can do to prevent contractors from making such errors at the city's expense. I think that we should hold these contractors accountable. I think that we give them a little bit more latitude, and maybe in this situation, an inspector should have caught it, but probably figures this is a known contractor and didn't inspect properly, and then we didn't hold the contractor accountable for the error. And I'm wondering what might be done about that.
It's just, the thing that could be done about it, Nick, is we just need to be more diligent in following up on these things, and also being more aware of what's going on in the right-of-way. Sometimes contractors will be doing work that we don't even know about, and so we have to, as we're passing by, we need to be aware of what's going on, but follow up to make sure that things are constructed according to plans and specifications, and that everything is properly permitted. And it's the level of effort that's needed to do that sometimes can be daunting, because anyone that's been around town recently has seen a lot of utilities, contractors. There's a lot of stuff being worked on, but it is our responsibility to make sure that those things are done and that problems like the ones you encountered don't happen. And so we're always trying to improve our efforts for that. And one thing that we are doing now is coming up with our new design specifications for anyone that wants to, cut into our streets, for instance. We're trying to, hold people accountable for the actual cost that it takes when somebody, if we repave a new street and they want to cut into it, well, there's going to be a cost associated with that. And so people need to be responsible, and then we need to hold them responsible. And so it's just a matter of, diligence on our part.
Even if it's Southern California Edison.
Even, yes.
And so I don't know what the cost was to correct that situation with the fire hydrant on Kyle Orellis, but I feel like that should have been the contractor's expense, not the city's.
And it was the contractor's expense, yes.
Great. Good to know.
Yeah.
We still haven't got time, we have time for public comments. I know we have at least one. Is there any other comments from the committee members before we close up this great news from Mr. Dewey?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
And we now have time for public comments on this issue.
Yeah, we have a comment from Adelaide Ortega. You're welcome to stay where you are if you want to talk, or you can come on up.
My name is Adelaide Ortega. And we travel a lot around the city.
Why don't you come over here and right toward my voice here.
Okay. We do a lot of traveling around the city, a lot, and I've used a cane for almost 20 years before I decided to get a guide dog, and there are many, many obstacles out there, and as a matter of fact, there's just one right here on, okay, thank you. The one that you just showed, there's one right here on Garden and De La Guerra, and it's just like that one. There's a pole there, and it's so narrow that if you were using a cane and you were sweeping with your cane, you would really run into that. So I don't know if anybody has seen that one, but it is really dangerous there. And then there's a light pole right in front of it. And also, when I used to use a cane, a lot of the sidewalks are just really out of line, and they don't, when you're using a cane, you're sweeping with it. But a lot of the streets don't line up, like over there on Delavina and Mission Street. That is just terrible to cross there. And then also, as you're coming down Olive Street, when you cross Haley, there's no sidewalks there, and that's been like that for a really long time. And then there's the Santa Barbara High School, where they did tear down lots of trees there. I went to a meeting for that, but that did no good. The trees, they just took down about maybe 10 of them to build the new stadium that is there. And I was wondering if they're going to put a sidewalk there where they took down the trees. And also, using a guide dog, I wanted to know who was responsible, or who do we talk to when there's construction going on
is it the responsibility of the city to remove the overhangs? Or is it the construction people that we should be talking to? Or is it the residents who we should be talking to? And let's see, and I teach ceramics at the Braille Institute, and I think it would be really good if we could get someone from the city, and maybe I can gather up a few students, because they do a lot of traveling with canes, and if we could get together and they could give their opinions where they think that something could be done, maybe we could have a meeting at the Braille Institute.
That's a great idea to help compile this list, and I think that would be good input for the subcommittee.
Yeah, very
The
good.
town hall thing. Jim, do you have any responses to those particular places?
Sorry, Adelaide, I didn't record all of your questions, but I guess there's sidewalk in front of where the construction is happening for the Santa Barbara High School, and there's a portion of the sidewalk that's missing there.
Right, where the trees used to be. All those beautiful trees, and they just, it was so sad. It broke my heart to see. So now when the county bowl has their concerts, I mean, it's just really, it really made a difference in our neighborhood with those trees coming down. And everybody went to the meeting, but
I do know that when the trees fell down, they also took a portion of the sidewalk out, and since then, I don't know how recently you've been down there, but the streets crews have replaced the sidewalks that were uprooted by the trees. I can't speak to...
I'm talking about where Olive Street is, and then there's the street right behind that. What is it, Figueroa or El Rincon? It's Figueroa, and then I think it's El Rincon. That's right behind where you buy your tickets.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with Santa Barbara High School.
Yes.
But where the football stadium
Yep.
is, well, right there are no sidewalks, and they're still working there, so I just want to know if they were going to replace the sidewalks.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the scope of the project, and Ashley, have you heard anything about that? I can't answer that question. But you had another question about overhangs.
Overhangs, yes. Who's responsible? Who do we talk to about things like that?
Okay, and you're talking about trees in this situation.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Parks and Recreation. The Parks Department manages the trees, and if we have an issue with a tree that's too low, we can put in a work order with them, and they'll trim it back.
Back to the Santa Barbara High School issue, is there a department or a contact you could recommend that Adelaide contact to get the answer to her question?
You can contact, possibly get some information from the Public Works front counter, which is just right out here. They may have information on whatever changes that need to happen in the public right-of-way that are associated with that project.
And so I wish you would go check out this right here on De La Guerra. On this street right here, Garden Street. And if you just go up, the same thing, that pole is there, and it's just really narrow. It's really hard to get through in that little area, too. So you don't have to go too far to find a lot of obstacles.
Are you talking about Garden and Ortega or up on De La Guerra?
It's on Garden Street, but I think it's when you cross De La Guerra Street. It's on that side.
Between De La Guerra and Cannon Perdido.
I think so, yeah. You don't have to go too far, but it's exactly the same thing like what you just talked about.
We'll look into that.
Okay.
And Jim, one last question. The overhanging trees, whether it's private property or not, you've mentioned parks, but I don't think they can remove private property trees, right? My question is complaints about guy wires that are dangerous, overhanging trees. Is there one central place that people can call, or is it all depends on whose jurisdiction?
You can call into the Public Works front counter, and they can route you to wherever that needs to be answered. But we have, if it's a private tree, we have the ability to request that they trim that, and if they don't, then we can have recourse from there. And if it's a street tree, then we can get a hold of Parks and Recreation, put in a work order for that.
To make sure any complaint can go to front desk, Public Works, and it should be handled.
Yeah, they'll route to wherever it needs to go. And if it's related to a utility, they'll, that'll get the proper routing too. But just be aware, it's, working with the utilities, the response isn't often what you would expect.
Is there any special plan to get rid of all the diagonal guy wires eventually and make them vertical posts?
Well, eventually, for the larger utility poles are starting to get away from wood, and they're shifting more to metal poles. Of course, that all depends on the tension of the wires and the direction that it's moving. There are some workarounds for that, but some of it has to be that, we may have to take the sidewalk and widen it around that area so that there's a path if we have the real estate to do that. There's no real simple solution. I'd like to see all the utilities undergrounded, but that's very expensive.
Metal poles would not require guide wires normally then?
Some of them would not require guide wires.
I just have one more question. I don't know if this falls into what you do, but there's a light on State Street. On State Street, and I didn't know about it, but my friend told me when you push the button, it blinks, and that's it's not auto described, but who would you talk to about getting more of those audio crossing lights? In I love the one that they did on by Ralph's grocery store. That is absolutely fabulous.
That would really be a function of the suggestions that the subcommittee can make, and they can make them directly to me. And our traffic engineer, Derek Bailey, is the one who designs those and installs them. And so if there is a request for that, and if it makes sense, we can get that installed.
And because I was thinking, how come if they were going to install that blinking light, why didn't they just put an audio thing in there too at the same time? I don't know how that would work, but
I agree. That makes a whole lot of sense with these hawk lights and the other, crossing flashers. There should be some sort of audible. I mean, we at normal crosswalks there's an audible tone. I don't know how these newer crosswalks got overlooked in that regard.
Yeah, Derek Bailey could speak intelligently to that, and he would love to talk about all these little things with you.
Yeah, because they certainly don't help the visually impaired people with them blinking, off and on. I didn't even know it was there until somebody brought it to my attention.
Yeah, now Derek will be attending some of these meetings, so the subcommittee can, have a say about some of those, making some of those suggestions.
All right, thank you very much.
Ashley, you mentioned the one at Alomar that's prioritized in coming in at Puesta del Sol. Can we make sure that audible tone is considered before that construction?
I have to talk with Derek about the audible tone at the pedestrian flashers rather than at traffic signals. I don't know what the capabilities are, but we can certainly talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
This has been very rewarding and interesting, but I think in the sake of time, we need to go on to our next. Thank you so much, Mr. Dewey, for all that.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, it's time to discuss the valet parking.
I'd like to hand out
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the other things, too.
Ballot.
Ballot.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Victor Garza, Downtown Parking Superintendent, and I'm here to give you an update on the process to implement a valet parking ordinance. When I'm talking about the Valley Parking Ordinance, I'm talking about our purview recently, which is to manage the parking supply and on the citywide streets. The city staff went to the City Council's Ordinance Committee on July 25th to ask for some direction to get started on the process with a draft Valley Parking Ordinance. Because there were so many questions and issues that we weren't able to resolve at that meeting, the Ordinance Committee wisely pitched it to the Downtown Parking Committee to be the body that would start vetting out all the issues and questions regarding how to implement an ordinance, how to develop a permitting and rules and regulations process within the public right-of-way. So the Valley topic went before the Parking Committee on September 14th. We had also met with the building official to check with him on what may be impacting the ordinance and how to roll it out into the street with regard to ADA compliance. In downtown parking, we always check with the building staff, and especially the ADA specialists, to make sure that we're in compliance with paths of travel, number of spaces, dimensions of parking spaces, number of parking spaces. And upon meeting with a building official, we realized that it was going to be difficult to implement, or I should say to implement a Valley parking permitting and rules and regulations ordinance, and have compliance with ADA, especially with the current ongoing Valley operations. And so part of our process to try to get a better understanding and get to the compliance, we decided to come to this committee to seek some guidance, possibly some direction, some feedback, some input, some assistance, if you will, to try to get this compliance. And so that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Victor. I think it'd be worthwhile to start with some of the committee's initial concerns. I know we've talked about them a little bit previously in the past, but it'd be nice to get kind of a consolidation of general concerns with Valley Ordinance. Nick, I know you have some input.
Yeah. So I want to thank Public Works for bringing this important issue before this committee, and specifically I'd also like to thank city building official for highlighting the importance of ADA compliance. I've personally struggled with ADA-related valet parking issues numerous times. In fact, it's one of the primary reasons I joined this committee. And I've seen this disturbing trend in the community with businesses and their valet parking contractors and an utter disregard for ADA parking laws. And that being said, I have two areas of concern with the information that's currently in front of me. And one is that the proposed ordinance draft has no mention of persons with ADA or ADA parking, or with disabilities or ADA parking at all. And I think in situations where the only available parking is via valet, persons with disabilities must be allowed to self-park and in the same lot, and the ordinance should clearly reflect that. I know that state and federal law reflects that, but I would like to see this ordinance support that and have some recourse for enforcement here at a local level in terms of tying back into those valet parking permits and their standing with the city. And I do notice that the Public Works Department policy here does appear to address ADA rights in the rules, application process, and grounds for refusal. But I would really like to see the department policy have more detailed plans for addressing ADA violations, including how to report them, remedies, and penalties. This should not be left for local law enforcement or civil litigation as the only recourse for someone like me to resolve a problem.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Nick says, and the experience, my son uses a wheelchair, we have a ramp van, so if we do encounter a valet parking situation where there appears to be, a blue space, we don't want them, we can't get out of the car usually, it's so crowded that, we need the access to get into that blue space, use the stripe zone, use the path of travel to the destination, and park our own car.
Right.
It just doesn't work any other way.
So are those examples of valet operators improperly using disabled spaces on private property or within the public right-of-way?
My experience is with private property.
That's been my experience too.
Okay.
Where the blue space has been overtaken by the valet
But
operation.
this ordinance could cover private property as well, correct?
It says it does not.
Well, then that's
we
a
have to
third
deal-
point. I would like to see this cover private property as well.
We can look into that.
Maybe let me give my spiel, because I agree
Yeah.
with both of these people,
Yeah.
but in a little different angle. This is city-owned property, and they're giving away the rights to use it to someone else for some kind of permit fee. This whole ordinance is a program run by the city, which puts you under Title II, which says you cannot discriminate with disabled people. So we have two issues here. One is the drawing here, which I don't think many people are going to be cutting down the curb, narrowing the sidewalk, doing all this work, okay? This is fine, but this is what's on the plans, and this can be certified by a certified access specialist, that the plans look good. But what the problem with Title II is, it's the implementation of the program. So as soon as one guy moves the valet stand, or he doesn't let you park, as Nick said, in a lot that they've maybe decided, and before I go further, let me get clarification. Are they thinking about renting private lots at night? Are you going to use public garages or just on-street parking? The ordinance has nothing to do with where are these cars going to go. So that kind of affects how far does a person like Nick need to go if he's going to use the valet's parking spot. But those are all operational things which a CAS person cannot know ahead of time. This is something that changes, okay? And what we need, first of all, to clarify what Nick said, in your proposal, there is a 10.49.03 that says designation of valet parking zones. That needs to say, and I insist that it says, including ADA compliance. Right now, you talk about public safety, insurance, all these different things, but nothing's mentioned about ADA compliance. That should be in 10.49.030, and also in 10.49.080, where it talks about revocation or suspension of licenses. Again, there's no mention that you can violate ADA requirements and nothing happens. And one question I have to know ahead of time. The original ordinance that I saw talked about I think it was $1,000 permit fee per location. The new document you sent out, I don't see anything, whether is it one permit for the operator or is it one permit per location?
There's, normally we don't talk about dollar values of permits in ordinance language.
Right, that's in the rules and regs, right?
In the rules and regs.
Right.
And those have not been finalized. We're
Okay.
still debating what's the most appropriate.
But let's forget the dollar amount. Is it going to be permit per location or per operator?
we're still not sure about how that's
Well,
going.
here's my huge fear on that. If it's one permit for an operator, and he has 20 different locations, and one place is not ADA compliant, you are not going to pull that guy's permit for all 20. We know that. You're not going to do that. So therefore,
We should.
therefore, there's no way there's going to be punishment. So if it's not permit per location, you have no real way to enforce ADA compliance. So
I disagree. I think that they could enforce it across all locations. If the permit's across all locations, you have to be compliant across all locations.
well, I agree,
or
but
lose
I'm
all.
talking about practical matters. They're not going to take this
Why wouldn't they? Why
because
couldn't they?
because City Hall wants to support businesses. They're not going to do it. Let's face it. Right?
Okay, well,
I mean, they should.
If they're not willing to do it that way, then I agree they should do it on a per location basis. But
And also, it might be unfair. Well, anyway, the point is, I think it should be on a permit basis. Otherwise, you have no way to enforce a suspension. You know, the good lawyers will come in and go, hey, 19 of 20 of ours have no problem. How can you suspend our whole license? So that's a big fear. But this is under Title II, which means the operations have to be non-discriminatory, not just the drawing, not just the ramp. And a few questions I have here. Permit applications must be transparent and readily available for the public to view. Any complaint about noncompliance with the ordinance, including federal ADA requirements of noncompliance, should be handled by some kind of review board open to the public. A clear procedure for citizens to address ADA revocation or suspension must be by committee, not only by the Public Works Department. Right now, it seems to read that only the one person at Public Works decides to give a permit, and he's the only one who can revoke or suspend a license. And I want to make a point to anyone who's not familiar with how ADA works. The city is responsible for this program, but in reality, if there's a problem, Karen or Nick or Martha have to go and file a civil suit with the Department of Justice. Puts all the onus on the person who's been wronged. We need a system where the city can be told, this is not correct. You get it fixed with your owner. You just can't tell the owner or the leasee that he's responsible for ADA, because that doesn't make it taken care of. I think we have to have some system where the citizen can go right to the city and say, this is not in compliance, please check it out and do the proper thing, and let us know in advance that there's a meeting and a review. Do those items fit with the committee?
I agree.
Yes.
Are there other comments? Should we somehow make a motion that this be put into our statement here, that we need it to be listed in the ordinance about
I'd certainly
ADA
like
compliance?
to make sure that all these points are reflected in the minutes.
Yeah, the minutes will capture all of this. I don't know, unless the committee has a direct motion to make. Everything that's been said
If all those
today
things will be in
captured
there,
the minutes.
and there's going to be a review, and you're going to report back to your people, I would like, if everybody agrees with what I just said, that those things need to be there. But it needs to be a transparent system so that some operator cannot just get away with not following the law. And I would hope that a CAS member could actually review some of these, because it really is going to come down to interpretation. And let's face it, these rules are so complex that there's no one way to interpret every rule out there. We need someone like a CASP who is trained in ADA compliance to look at any complaint, or perhaps even the permits, but it might be overkill. That
Yeah,
acceptable?
I think we all agree on that. And I think that you'll take that back to the ordinance committee, or the Downtown Parking Association is next, right?
Well, first of all, thank you for this feedback.
And we appreciate you coming to us with this, really.
This is a collaborative effort, so we're trying to get this right. And because as of right now, I think I may have said this earlier, the ongoing, the valley operations that we know of right now do not comply. And so if we tried to permit them, we would, I mean, there's no way we could. So this is great input. We'll be circling back with staff, with our traffic engineer, with the downtown parking committee, with the building department staff. We're working closely with Andrew and Elizabeth, and then we can come back to you to make sure that we've got it right and
thank you.
Move forward.
That was going to be one part of my request that I forgot to mention. We would like to hear back before this is actually going to the city council.
Absolutely.
And I want to point out something that maybe is not 100% correct, but my understanding was a few years ago when the operators first started to want to have a valet parking ordinance, they looked at the Hotel Californian, which has that in their plans. But the Hotel California doesn't have this. They have no loading zone. So a brand-new thing built by, approved by the city is not in compliance with what we think should be there. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
We're in the process right now. Elizabeth, are you involved in that? Probably not. Probably not. Yeah. So that was noted during the final inspections of the Hotel California.
Okay.
That the loading zone was not in compliance. So they are working right now with building department staff, with our public works traffic engineer to make sure that it is compliant.
That's good to hear. But it was approved, the way it was designed was approved by somebody as being compliant when it's not. So.
Well, we haven't finished the process,
Okay, yeah.
and it will be compliant when it's complete.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that we did that.
Yes.
And I know that's a lot of work to do on State Street to start doing these cutbacks, because then you're talking about reducing the sidewalk size. And also, keep in mind, these valet stands are going to reduce the sidewalk past the travel.
With that, I think it's important to note that when we have new construction, or if we have valet operations on private property, including city parking lots, that we will make sure, working with the building folks, that the valet operations are compliant. Okay. What I'm talking about right now are valet operations in the public right-of-way.
Right.
Those are extremely difficult because of the space involved, the infrastructure that we need to deal with, and so we're stuck right now in trying to figure out a solution for those. But in those other situations, I can tell you right now that with the depot lot down by the Reagan Center, that we've worked with the building department staff to do some changes to the striping to make sure that when they have a valet operation that they're fully compliant.
Okay.
And I'm also concerned about the parking at the harbor area, because it's a separate parking entity somehow, but there's also valet parking in public places there, both on the wharf and at the by the Maritime Museum.
Right, that's where I've encountered the situation I described, where
I've
the
had
blue
problems
space
there, too.
was not available. Can you give us an example, Mr. Garza, of some of the locations that are under valet parking operations in the public right-of-way?
I'm aware of valet parking, loading and unloading going on at Los Arroyos on Coast Village Road, in front of the Lark, on Helena Street. Those are the two primary ones. Every now and then I hear of some other locations. People have kind of one-off things for special events, birthday parties or weddings or whatever, sometimes in residential areas or in more outlying areas. My focus has been more on the downtown up to now. Now I'm getting more into citywide issues. Mm-hmm. So if you know of any other ongoing operations, I'd like to know about them.
So Victoria Street Theater or Arlington, things like that, they're not doing valet at this point in time. It's mostly down at the,
Sometimes the Granada does some. I'm not aware of the Victoria doing anything. They have a cutout for passengers, for cars to pull over and stop and unload. But I'm not aware of the Victoria or the Arlington doing valet.
Okay.
They may be, but I'm just not aware of it.
yeah, but just down at the harbor for the restaurants down there.
Yeah, I'll talk to the water department folks and make them aware of this.
Okay.
Thank you. I had talked to Carl before about that and whether we could self-park in the handicap zones that the valet service had co-opted. And he said yes to talk to them individually as the need arose, which seemed like not entirely a good resolution of the problem.
I want to clarify something just in case you're not aware. Vans that have special steering devices, foot pedals and stuff, sometimes those people cannot trust or don't want anyone else to drive their vehicle. Most people who have a wheelchair van don't mind, that I've talked to anyway, but some do, and so we have to make sure that those who have a special vehicle are not penalized by this. And I just want to point out real quick, since you mentioned the Lark, they are parking their cars stacked, and I understand it gets more cars in there, but they park them on the blue handicap spot. So a true person who needs a handicap spot, it's not available. The same thing happens down at the Indigo. They do off-street loading, so it's not an on-street loading, but they're parking cars in the blue spot. And then, so a person who needs that can't use it because they have a double or triple stack there. That's a problem that I think is an ADA violation that no one seems to deal with. So I just want to make sure you understood. That's kind of a problem here.
Just so the committee knows, on that note, and this has been an ongoing issue, and we've talked about it in the past, and I know the solution may not appease the group, but it has been made clear that ADA violations of somebody parking in a blue-marked ADA spot with a disability placard, without a disability placard, is enforceable by the Santa Barbara Police Department on both private property and in the public right-of-way. The caveat is those calls, those complaints, they're handled in a prioritization.
Yes.
So the police department is busy, and I understand the concern that
It'll never be a priority.
the minute you need that spot, it's going to be hard to have an officer show up.
I think what we're talking about specifically here is where the valet service takes over those spots,
Yeah.
so they could move the cars.
Regardless, that is enforceable by the Santa Barbara Police Department, and the fine is hefty, so they will.
But it could also be enforced by this permitting process.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say that one of the things we can do in our rules and regulations language is to make sure that valet operators comply on private property as well as on public. And if we know about violations, that they can be subject to permit revocation.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate Mike's statement is right. It's up to police on priority, which is not going to be real fast. But why can't the city just let the valet owners know, by the way, you're not allowed to do this, even though it's your private property, you cannot use the blue spaces as your own parking spot. They need to be aware of that, so the valet company itself knows this is not correct, instead of waiting for the police to show up. That would be helpful, I think.
I think this ordinance is the perfect opportunity to
Yeah.
do that, and
Right. I can assure you that language will be in there when we finalize it.
great.
And by the way, I don't even drive because I can't see, so if this doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me at all.
Do you have any more questions for me? Or?
No, Victor, unless there was public comment on this.
If you don't, I can provide you with my phone number and email. Feel free to contact me anytime if you have any questions regarding
Thank
this.
you. I
you very
think we
much.
all appreciate you coming here.
And I
And
appreciate
please
it.
keep us posted.
Once again.
We will. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Victor.
What did he sing at Mickey Mouse Club? It's time to stop the show. Anyway, I think if there's no reason, I think it's time to adjourn this meeting, and I think it was.
Next meeting.
I would.
Second February, second Friday.
And I think it was a very successful meeting. I appreciate it. And again, just a reminder, you're going to get something out on the report to council before the next meeting so we can, okay, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Tina, thank you a lot.
February 16th,
15th?
60.
Okay.
Friday. We'll post that up
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
on the website.
Jim, are we adjourned?
I think we're adjourned.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.